The fluorescent hospital lights buzzed faintly above, filling the room with a cold, artificial glow. Amara Lewis, a 27-year-old Black American woman, sat propped against thin pillows, her arms cradling 3 tiny bundles wrapped in pastel blankets. Her dark skin glistened with sweat and tears, her curly hair damp from hours of labor. Her newborn daughters, Serenity, Faith, and Grace, slept soundly against her chest, their soft breaths rising and falling in delicate rhythm. Each weighed barely 5 pounds, their fragile fingers curled like tiny flower petals. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung in the air, but it couldn't mask the bitter taste of fear pressing at the back of Amara's throat. Her life had changed forever in the past 12 hours, but not in the way she had dreamed. Across the room, Marcus Lewis, her 30-year-old Black American husband, yanked open the small closet, pulling his clothes from hangers and stuffing them into a worn duffel bag. His movements were sharp and angry. Each fabric tug was a punctuation mark in a conversation Amara didn't want to have. "Marcus, please," Amara whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and emotion. "Look at them. Look at your daughters. They're healthy. They're beautiful. We made them." But Marcus didn't turn around. His shoulders were tense, his jaw clenched so tightly that his neck muscles quivered. "3 girls, Amara." His voice cracked on the words. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? What does this mean for us?" Amara's arms instinctively tightened around the babies, shielding them from his anger. "It means we have a family," she said softly, rocking the infants gently. "It means we're blessed." "Blessed." Marcus spun around, his dark brown eyes flashing with frustration. "My grandmother always said, triplet girls bring nothing but hardship and misfortune. Do you know how this looks? People at church are already talking. Mrs. Patterson won't even look at me anymore." A hollow silence stretched between them. "This isn't about superstition," Amara said, finally struggling to keep her voice steady. "This is about responsibility, about being their father." But Marcus shook his head, his lips curling into a bitter smile. "Responsibility?" He zipped the duffel bag with a harsh jerk. "I can't carry this, Amara. I won't. Not with everyone watching us, judging us." Amara felt the sting of betrayal burn deep in her chest. But before she could respond, the door creaked open, and Dr. Samuel Evans, a middle-aged white physician with kind blue eyes, stepped inside holding a clipboard. His expression was grim. "Mrs. Lewis," Dr. Evans said gently, glancing between them. "I'm sorry to interrupt. We need to discuss your insurance. Your policy doesn't cover an extended stay for multiple births. The total cost is now $47,000. Amara froze. 47. Before she could process the number, Marcus grabbed his duffel bag and slung it over his shoulder. He said flatly, "That's her problem now, not meeting anyone's eyes." Amara's voice broke loud enough that Serenity stirred in her arms. "Don't you dare walk out on us." But he didn't stop. Without glancing at his daughters, at the fragile lives they had created together, Marcus walked out the door. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing fainter, until they disappeared altogether. Amara stared at the doorway, her chest tightening until she thought she might break. Her daughters, oblivious to the unraveling of their family, slept peacefully against her chest. Dr. Evans cleared his throat softly. "Mrs. Lewis," he began hesitantly, "without payment. Arrangements. Hospital policy requires that we discharge you and the babies by tomorrow morning." Her vision blurred as tears pooled in her eyes. "And go where?" she whispered. "There are social services," he offered, gently, shifting uncomfortably. "I can have someone from the department speak with you." Amara nodded numbly, barely hearing him. When Dr. Evans left, the silence felt crushing, interrupted only by the soft hum of the overhead lights and the distant murmur of hospital activity outside the door. Nightfall. By evening, the shadows in the room lengthened. Amara sat alone in the dim light, nursing the babies individually. Each tiny face, perfect innocent, seemed to both mend and break her heart. There was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," she said weakly. The door opened, revealing Nurse Linda Morales, a warm-hearted Latina in her late 40s, who had been caring for Amara throughout her stay. Linda entered with a small smile, carrying a fresh blanket. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" Linda asked softly, settling onto the edge of the bed. Amara shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "I don't know how I'm supposed to do this, Linda. I don't know how to raise 3 babies alone. My family won't even return my calls. Everyone thinks we're cursed." Linda reached over and gently touched Amara's arm. "People fear what they don't understand. But listen to me. Amara, love always finds a way. You have 3 little miracles in your arms, and miracles don't happen by accident." Amara swallowed hard, clinging to those words as if they were oxygen. That night, she made a silent promise to Serenity, Faith, and Grace. "I'll take care of you," she whispered, pressing a trembling kiss to each tiny forehead. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way. You deserve everything good in this world, and I'll give it to you." Closing scene. Outside, city lights twinkled in the distance as if mocking her isolation. The quiet hum of hospital machinery reminded Amara of the clock counting down to tomorrow morning, when she and her daughters would be forced to leave. She felt fear like she had never known before, but a spark of determination flickered beneath the terror. Marcus might have walked away. Her family might have turned their backs. The community might whisper behind closed doors. But Amara Lewis wasn't going to give up. Not on Serenity, not on Faith, not on Grace. Tomorrow she would walk out of this hospital into an unforgiving world, a single mother of 3 with no money, no home, and no plan. But she would walk out fighting. 2 weeks later, the cold January wind cut through the thin walls of Amara's tiny 1-bedroom apartment. The heater hadn't worked for months, and she couldn't afford to fix it. Every night she layered the triplets in mismatched blankets and kept them close, hoping her body heat would be enough to keep them warm. Serenity, Faith, and Grace slept in 3 makeshift cribs, cobbled together from cardboard boxes lined with towels. Their soft breaths puffed tiny clouds into the frigid air. Amara sat hunched over the kitchen table, the glow of a single lamp illuminating a mountain of overdue bills. The largest one lay on top, stamped in bright red letters, "Final notice, eviction in 7 days." Her chest tightened as she glanced toward her nearly empty purse. Inside was $18.47, all she had to her name. 3 jobs. 1 mother. Amara strapped the triplets every morning before dawn into an old second-hand stroller. She walked 2 blocks to Mrs. Rodriguez, her elderly neighbor, who babysat while Amara worked her first job cleaning downtown office buildings. By noon, she rushed across the city for her second job at a fast food restaurant, where she worked until her feet ached and her hands smelled of grease long after she got home. On weekends, she took in laundry for other tenants in the building, scrubbing until her knuckles cracked from the detergent. Despite everything, it was never enough. The formula was expensive. Diapers vanished faster than she could replace them. Rent devoured what little she earned. She skipped meals repeatedly to ensure her daughters didn't go hungry. Whispers and judgments. The walls of the apartment complex carried voices efficiently, and Amara heard the whispers whenever she walked down the hallway with the stroller. "There goes the girl with the 3 cursed babies. Poor thing. Husband left her, you know. Should have been more careful." She kept her head high, forcing herself not to react. But when she was alone, the words stung worse than any physical blow. Her own family refused to speak to her. Her mother hadn't visited since the birth, and her sisters had stopped returning her calls entirely. No one wanted to be associated with what they called her bad luck. Still, Amara endured. for serenity, for faith, for grace. The landlord's ultimatum. Late one evening, as Amara bounced a fussy Serenity on her hip, there was a loud knock at the door. Her stomach twisted as she peered through the peephole. Mr. Hayes, her landlord, stood outside with arms crossed and an envelope in hand. Amara opened the door cautiously. "Mr. Hayes, we need to talk," he interrupted, stepping into the doorway. His expression was firm, but not unkind. "I can't keep giving you extensions, Amara. You're 3 months behind on rent. The other tenants are complaining about the crying babies. This arrangement just isn't working. Please," she pleaded, shifting Serenity in her arms. "I get paid on Friday. I can give you half then and the rest in 2 weeks." He shook his head. "I've heard that before. I've already found someone who can take this place at full price." Tears stung her eyes as her voice broke. "Where am I supposed to go? I don't have anywhere else." "I'm sorry," Mr. Hayes said, lowering his voice, "but you have until Sunday to be out." He left the envelope in her trembling hand, the official eviction notice, and walked away without another word. Amara closed the door and slid down against it, pressing her forehead to her knees as silent sobs racked her body. Serenity whimpered softly, resting her tiny head against her mother's chest. "I'm sorry, baby," Amara whispered through tears. "I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." A cold walk in the dark. The next morning, she bundled the triplets in oversized jackets from a thrift store and wheeled them through icy streets to her cleaning job at Sterling Tower, one of the city's tallest and most prestigious office buildings. She'd gotten the job through a neighbor's recommendation 2 weeks earlier. It paid slightly more than her previous cleaning position, but barely enough to survive. She met her supervisor, Mrs. Garcia, at the service entrance when she arrived. "Amara." Mrs. Garcia said sternly, her sharp dark eyes narrowing at the stroller. "You know the rules. No children allowed on the job." "I know, Mrs. Garcia," Amara said quickly, "but Mrs. Rodriguez is sick today, and I couldn't find anyone else. Please, just this once. I'll work twice as fast. They won't make a sound." Mrs. Garcia sighed deeply, glancing at the sleeping babies. "Fine, but stay on the lower floors, and if anyone complains, I'll have no choice but to send you home." Relief flooded through Amara as she nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I promise you won't regret it." Breaking point. By midnight, Amara was still mopping marble floors under the dim lights of Sterling Tower's lobby. Her back ached, her hands were raw, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. Grace stirred in the stroller, letting out a soft cry that quickly escalated. Faith followed seconds later, her tiny wails echoing in the grand, empty lobby. Serenity joined in moments after. Amara's panic rose as she rocked the stroller, murmuring soothing words, but nothing worked. She crouched beside them, tears welling in her eyes. "I know, babies. I know you're hungry," she whispered, voice cracking. "Mama's doing the best she can." And in that moment, crouched on a polished floor she couldn't afford to walk on as a guest, the weight of everything crushed her. The eviction notice, the empty fridge, the bills are piling up. Marcus's absence, the whispers, the stares, the cold. She wanted to scream, but she swallowed the sound. Crying wouldn't change anything. Instead, she wiped her face, rocked her daughters, and kept working because stopping wasn't an option. Not anymore. A rumor of opportunity. During her lunch break, Amara sat on a bench outside Sterling Tower, 2 days later, sipping from a small bottle of water. She overheard 2 janitors talking nearby. "Did you hear?" one of them whispered. "Mr. Sterling himself is looking for a new caretaker at his estate. Live-in position. Pays more than we make in 3 months. Amara froze, mid-sip, her heart pounding. "Whoever gets it is set," the other replied. "But good luck." They're looking for someone trustworthy. A live-in position, a steady paycheck, a roof over her daughters' heads. A flicker of hope stirred inside her for the first time in weeks. She didn't know it yet, but this rumor would lead her straight into the path of Ethan Sterling, the man who would change everything. Closing scene. After putting the triplets to sleep that night, Amara sat at the kitchen table staring at the eviction notice again. Her future felt like it was hanging by a thread, but now, something else was tangled in that fragile thread possibility. Tomorrow, she would find out more. Tomorrow, she would fight for that job. Because she had nothing left to lose, and 3 tiny reasons not to give up. The following morning, Amara stood outside Sterling Tower, staring at the massive glass skyscraper piercing the pale winter sky. The building seemed to touch the clouds its mirrored surface, reflecting sunlight in sharp, blinding bursts. She adjusted the worn strap of her cleaning cart and exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. Today wasn't just another shift. Today, she needed answers. The rumor she'd overheard about the live-in caretaker position wouldn't leave her mind. If it were true, she and her daughters could finally have security if she could land the job. No more eviction threats, no more cardboard cribs, no more nights spent choosing between rent and formula. But she had no connections, no resume worth reading, no recommendation letters. All she had was desperation and 3 little girls depending on her. Unwelcome attention. Amara pushed her cart into the grand lobby across marble floors, which were polished so brightly that they reflected her anxious face. Business executives in tailored suits brushed past her without a glance, their leather shoes clicking crisply against the tile. One of the receptionists, a young woman with flawless makeup and a sharp bob haircut, whispered something to a colleague as Amara passed. They both looked at her at the faint bleach stains on her uniform, the circles under her tired eyes, and smirked. She kept her chin up, pretending not to notice. She'd learned long ago that pride was the only armor she could afford. When she reached the service elevator, Mrs. Garcia, her supervisor, intercepted her. "Amara," she said, frowning. "You're late." "I know," Amara admitted, breathless. "The girls were fussy this morning. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." Mrs. Garcia's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Be careful. Sterling Tower isn't forgiving of mistakes. And whatever you do, stay away from the executive floors. That's where the CEO's office is. You don't want trouble." Amara nodded, though the words made her heart race. Ethan Sterling. The name was etched on the company logo, plastered across every elevator, every letterhead, every branded mug in the break room. The billionaire who built this empire from the ground up. If anyone knew about the caretaker position, it would be him. But how could she ever reach someone like that? The crying that changed everything. By early afternoon, Amara was alone on the 37th floor, where she'd been sent to clean the executive conference rooms. She hesitated when she stepped off the elevator. The hallway here looked more like a luxury hotel than an office, with mahogany paneling, glass artwork, and thick carpeting muffling every step. It was silent, until it wasn't. Grace began fussing softly from the stroller beside her cart, her tiny whimpers quickly building into sharp cries. Amara froze, panic seizing her chest. She thought she'd hidden the babies under their blankets, hoping no one would notice she'd brought them today, after Mrs. Rodriguez called again, too ill to babysit. "Shh, baby," Amara whispered, rocking the stroller gently. But Faith stirred next, followed by Serenity, and within seconds, all 3 were wailing in unison. "Not now," she begged desperately, trying to soothe them. Her own voice cracked with exhaustion, and that's when she heard a deep, unfamiliar voice behind her. "What's going on in here?" The meeting. Amara spun around, her stomach lurching. Standing in the doorway was a tall man In a dark navy suit, the sleeves rolled slightly, as if he'd pushed them up while working. His presence filled the room effortlessly, not just because of his height, but because of his quiet authority. Ethan Sterling. She knew immediately. She'd seen his face in business magazines and on the occasional news segment playing in break rooms. But in person, he was less polished than his photographs suggested. His tie hung loose, his sandy brown hair slightly tousled, and faint lines curved near his piercing gray eyes. The kind of face that belonged to someone who had lived more than his wealth could hide. "I'm sorry, sir," Amara stammered hastily, reaching for her cleaning supplies. "I shouldn't be on this floor. I'll leave right away." But Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted from her flushed, panicked expression to the stroller beside her, where 3 tiny faces peeked out beneath blankets, their cries softening into hiccups. "Triplets?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice laced with surprise more than judgment. "Yes," Amara said, forcing calm into her voice. I couldn't find anyone to watch them today. I promise it won't happen again." He crouched beside the stroller, studying the babies with an expression Amara couldn't read, curiosity, maybe awe. When he smiled faintly, the tension in the room shifted. "They're beautiful," he said softly, almost to himself. "What are their names?" Amara hesitated, wary of answering, but something in his tone, gentle, patient, eased her nerves. "Serenity," she said quietly, pointing to the baby blinking at him with wide eyes. "Faith and Grace." Ethan's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. Fitting names. Strong names. A conversation she didn't expect. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the building's ventilation filled the silence until Ethan straightened and met her gaze. "You work here?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Part-time. Night shifts. I clean the lower floors usually. And yet somehow you're on my executive level." His tone was dry, but not unkind. Her cheeks burned. "I was assigned this floor today. I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding," he said after a pause. "But you look tired." Amara blinked at him, startled by his bluntness. I guess I am. It's been a lot lately." Ethan's expression softened, though he didn't push further. Instead, he glanced at the babies again, then back at her. "I'm assuming they're the reason." She gave a small, exhausted laugh. "They're the reason I work 3 jobs, yes." He didn't smile this time. His gaze sharpened like someone cataloging details and drawing quiet conclusions. An offer hinted, not given. Ethan finally stepped back, sliding his hands into his pockets. "You should know," he said evenly. "Sterling Enterprises has a strict no-children policy for staff on site." Amara swallowed hard and nodded quickly. "I understand. It won't happen again. I didn't have a choice today." He studied her silently for a moment, as though weighing something she couldn't see. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened. "Don't apologize for taking care of your children," he said quietly. "But if you're going to survive this city, you're going to need more than hard work." Amara blinked, unsure how to respond. Before she could speak, his phone buzzed. Ethan glanced at the screen, muttered a quiet apology, and approached the door. But just before leaving, he paused and turned back. "Amara right?" She froze. "Yes, sir." "I'll remember that," he said, then disappeared into the hallway. Closing scene. Amara stood frozen in the silent conference room for several seconds, her heart pounding in her chest. He knew her name now. She had no idea if that was good or bad. But deep down, for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than fear or exhaustion. She felt seen. She didn't know yet that Ethan Sterling wouldn't forget her or the image of three tiny girls bundled in their stroller on his executive floor. And that moment, brief and unexpected, had just set her life on a path she never imagined. The next morning, Amara woke to Serenity crying softly in her cardboard crib. Her back ached from sleeping on the worn couch, but she forced herself up, scooping her daughter into her arms while trying not to wake Faith and Grace. The apartment was freezing. Thin drafts seeped through the cracked window frames, carrying the bitter chill of winter straight into the tiny room. She hugged Serenity close, whispering until the baby calmed, then glanced at the eviction notice still taped to the fridge. 4 days left. Her stomach tightened. She needed a miracle. A call from Mrs. Garcia. Later that afternoon, Amara scrubbed the marble floors in Sterling Tower's lower lobby when Mrs. Garcia called her into the supply room. The supervisor said, "You've caught someone's attention," folding her arms across her chest. Amara frowned. What do you mean?" Mrs. Garcia lowered her voice. "Mr. Sterling asked about you this morning. Wanted to know your name, how long you've been working here, and what shifts you take." Amara froze, gripping the rag in her hands. "He asked about me?" Mrs. Garcia nodded slowly, studying her face. "Relax, it didn't sound bad. If anything, he seemed curious." Amara didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Why would a man like Ethan Sterling, billionaire, CEO, owner of an empire, remember someone like her? Marcus returns. When Amara returned home that evening, pushing the old stroller up the cracked apartment stairs, she found a figure leaning against her doorframe. Her breath caught in her throat. Marcus. Her husband, or rather the man who used to be her husband, was dressed in a faded hoodie, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" Amara asked sharply, her voice low to avoid waking the babies. "I came to see my kids," Marcus said, straightening. "You didn't think I'd disappear forever, did you?" Amara's exhaustion flared into anger. "You walked out on us the night they were born. You left me with nothing, Marcus. And now you want to see your kids." He shifted uncomfortably, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I made a mistake. Okay. Things, they got to me. Everyone talking, my family breathing down my neck, saying 3 girls meant bad luck." She cut him off, her voice trembling. "Bad luck. They're not curses, Marcus. They're your daughters." Marcus sighed, glancing at the stroller where Serenity stirred softly. "I want to be part of their lives." "No." Amara's tone hardened. "You don't get to walk away and come back when it suits you." His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might argue. But instead, he exhaled slowly and backed away. "You'll regret this," he muttered, before turning down the hallway and disappearing into the shadows. Amara leaned against the door, clutching the stroller handle until her knuckles turned white. Her heart raced, but there was no time to process the confrontation. She was running out of time, out of money, out of options. The unexpected meeting. 2 days later. Amara's luck finally ran out. Mrs. Rodriguez was still too sick to babysit and couldn't afford another sitter. Against her better judgment, she brought the triplets to work again. She stayed on the lower floors, careful to avoid trouble, but halfway through her shift, Faith started crying, loud, sharp, unstoppable. Amara wheeled the stroller quickly into an empty hallway, bouncing her daughter gently as she whispered soothing words. That's when she heard footsteps. Rough day. Amara turned startled to find Ethan Sterling standing a few feet away. He wore no tie today, his gray dress shirt rolled at the sleeves and a sleek black coat draped casually over his arm. Her pulse quickened. "I'm sorry, sir. I know children aren't allowed on site. I'll leave right away." He shook his head. "Relax. You're not in trouble." Amara blinked, unsure how to respond. Ethan glanced at the babies, his gaze softening slightly. "They're beautiful," he said quietly, almost to himself. I have a spare office down the hall. You can settle them there for a bit if you need to." The unexpected kindness made Amara hesitate, but she nodded gratefully. "Thank you. That means more than you know." A quiet conversation. Inside the unused office, the triplets finally calmed, lulled by the soft hum of the building's ventilation. Amara sat on the edge of a chair, rocking serenity, while Ethan leaned casually against the desk, watching her thoughtfully. "You work hard," he said after a moment, his voice steady. "I asked around." Her chest tightened. What did they say?" "You should take every shift they offer you. You should never complain no matter how much is piled on. You're among the few people here who take pride in their work." Amara looked down, embarrassed by the unexpected praise. I have to. I don't really have a choice." Ethan studied her carefully. "And outside of work, do you have any support?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No. My family's not involved. And—" her voice faltered slightly. "The girl's father isn't around." He didn't press for details, but something shifted in his expression, a quiet recognition, as if he understood more than he let on. "The offer." Ethan straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I'm looking for someone trustworthy," he said finally. "Someone who can help manage my home while I travel for business. Someone careful, hardworking, reliable." Amara frowned slightly. "You mean a job?" "Yes," he said. "A live-in caretaker. You'd have a private 2-bedroom guest house, a steady salary, and full benefits on my estate. The position would allow you to bring your daughters." For a moment, Amara thought she hadn't heard him correctly. "A guest house," she repeated softly, disbelief threading through her voice. "With space for the girls?" "Of course," Ethan said, his tone even but firm. "They'd have room to grow. Stability. Security." Amara hesitated, the weight of the offer pressing on her chest. It sounded too good to be real, too safe, too generous. "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan paused, meeting her gaze directly. "Because I value character over credentials, and because you deserve a chance to breathe again." Closing scene. Amara sat there for several long seconds, struggling to steady her breath. Her mind spun with conflicting thoughts, Marcus's threats, the eviction notice, the endless bills, the girls' tiny cribs in their freezing apartment. This offer could change everything. But accepting it meant stepping into a world she didn't understand, one where she wasn't sure she belonged. Still, when she thought of serenity, faith, and grace, she knew she couldn't afford to let fear decide for her. She met Ethan's eyes, her voice quiet but steady. "When would you need me to start?" Ethan smiled faintly, just enough to soften the sharp edges of his expression. "How about now?" And just like that, Amara's life began to change. 2 days later, Amara stood frozen at the base of the long stone driveway, gripping the stroller handle tightly and clutching a diaper bag with the other. Before her stretched Sterling estate, a sprawling property hidden behind towering oak trees and wrought iron gates that had opened automatically when she arrived. The main house loomed ahead, its pale stone facade framed by perfectly trimmed hedges and gardens, so immaculate they looked like something out of a magazine. She swallowed hard, the weight of disbelief heavy in her chest. "This is where we live now," she whispered to the triplets, who blinked curiously from their seats, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment. First impressions. The front doors opened before she could gather herself, revealing Linda Morales, the estate's longtime housekeeper, dressed in a simple navy apron and wearing a warm, familiar smile. "Welcome, Amara," Linda said gently, stepping aside to let her in. "And these must be the angels." She leaned over the stroller, cooing softly at the 3 girls. "Oh my goodness, Look at you, serenity, faith, and grace. Ethan told me all about you. Amara managed a small smile. It's overwhelming. I know, Linda said knowingly, resting a hand on her shoulder. But we'll take it one step at a time. I've been running this house for 15 years. You're in good hands here. As Linda led her inside, Amara's breath caught in her throat. The mansion's interior was breathtaking, soaring ceilings, framed by intricate molding, wide staircases draped with rich rugs, and crystal chandeliers scattering light across polished marble floors. Every detail screamed wealth, the kind Amara had only ever seen in glossy magazines discarded in waiting rooms. But instead of awe, unease settled in her stomach. She didn't belong here. The guest house. Linda guided her around the side of the estate to a private stone path lined with rose bushes. At the end stood a charming two-bedroom guest house, its pale blue shutters and wraparound porch giving it an inviting warmth. Inside, Amara was stunned. The small cottage was fully furnished and stocked soft cream walls, cozy seating, a tidy kitchen with gleaming appliances, and 3 matching cribs in the nursery. The shelves were filled with diapers, formula, and tiny clothes, each neatly folded and sorted by size. Her throat tightened. I didn't buy any of this. Linda smiled softly. Ethan took care of it. The words made Amara pause. No one had ever prepared for her and her girls like this. No one had ever anticipated what she needed before she even asked. She knelt beside the cribs, touching the soft blankets, as tears stung her eyes. Serenity stirred and reached out a tiny hand, curling her fist around Amara's finger, as if grounding her in the moment. For the first time in months, Amara felt a sense of safety she didn't dare trust yet. Meeting Ethan. Again. That evening, Ethan stopped by the guest house after returning from meetings downtown. He knocked lightly before stepping inside, pausing just inside the doorway, as though careful not to intrude. "How are you settling in?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Amara glanced up from where she was unpacking a box of the girls' clothes. "It's incredible," she admitted softly. "Thank you for all of this. I don't even know how to put it into words." "Ethan said you don't need to thank me," leaning against the doorframe. "You're here because you've earned this opportunity, Amara. You work harder than most people I've met." Her cheeks warmed, though she kept her gaze on the tiny onesies in her hands. "I'm just trying to survive." Ethan hesitated before replying, his expression thoughtful. "You're doing more than surviving." Something unspoken lingered between them, quiet but palpable, until Grace's soft cries broke the moment. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, kneeling beside the crib. "May I?" he asked, gesturing gently toward the baby. Amara nodded hesitantly. Ethan scooped Grace into his arms with surprising ease, rocking her gently until the crying subsided. Amara observed that "You're good with them," almost surprised at her words. Ethan's lips curved faintly, though there was a shadow behind his smile. "I had to learn once." Opening old wounds. After settling Grace back in her crib, Ethan stood, his posture suddenly tense. "I never told you," he said slowly, "but I was married once." Amara froze, sensing the shift in his tone. Her name was Charlotte. He continued, his gaze drifting toward the nursery window, where evening light spilled across the floor. "She was 6 months pregnant when there was an accident. 5 years ago." Amara's chest tightened. "I'm so sorry," she said softly, meaning it. He nodded, once his expression controlled, but his voice quieter now. "After she passed, I thought I'd built this house for nothing. There were supposed to be little feet running through the halls. Laughter. Chaos. Instead, it became a museum of everything I lost." The weight of his confession hung heavily between them. For the first time, Amara saw beyond the polished exterior, beyond the wealth and authority. saw the quiet loneliness that shadowed his life. "I can't imagine," she whispered, holding Serenity a little closer. Ethan looked at her, then his gray eyes steady, but unreadable. "I don't want your pity, Amara. I just wanted you to know why I offered you this job." She frowned slightly. "Because of Charlotte. Because of you," he corrected gently. "Because when I saw you fighting for those girls with everything you had, I remembered what it felt like to believe in family again." Guidance from Linda. Later that night, after Ethan left, Linda stopped by to check in. She found Amara sitting on the edge of the bed, staring down at her folded hands. "You've got that look," Linda teased lightly, stepping into the room. Amara glanced up, managing a weak smile. "What looks?" "People get one thing when they realize their life has changed overnight." Amara exhaled shakily. "I don't know how to be here, Linda. I don't belong in a place like this." Linda crossed the room and sat beside her. "Listen to me, Amara. Belonging isn't about where you come from. It's about who you choose to be. You're here because you've earned it, and if you let yourself, you'll thrive." Her words settled like an anchor in Amara's chest, grounding her in the uncertainty. For the first time in what felt like forever, the fear inside her eased just a little. Closing scene. That night, after the triplets fell asleep in their matching cribs, Amara stood by the nursery window gazing across the estate. Warm lights glowed from the main house in the distance, and Ethan was probably working late somewhere inside as always. For the first time in months, she wasn't wondering how she'd make it through tomorrow. For the first time, she had hope. But she also sensed something unspoken lingering between her and Ethan Sterling, something neither of them was ready to name. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. A week after moving into the Sterling estate, Amara was still adjusting to the rhythm of her new life. Mornings began with soft sunlight spilling through the nursery windows, the triplets cooing happily from their matching cribs. For the first time since their birth, she didn't wake up to the sound of hungry cries and shivering bodies. Their bellies were full, their blankets warm, and their tiny faces serene. And yet, a strange unease lingered beneath her relief. The guest house was beautiful, the security comforting, but every time Amara stepped outside, crossing the perfectly manicured gardens, or passing by the elegant main house, she felt out of place, like an uninvited guest who had stumbled into someone else's dream. Learning to stand taller. One afternoon, Linda joined Amara in the kitchen while she prepared bottles for the triplets. The older woman leaned against the counter, watching her work with a thoughtful smile. Linda said gently, "That you're still walking around here waiting for someone to ask you to leave." Amara sighed, twisting the cap on a bottle. "It's hard not to. Look at this place, Linda. It doesn't feel real. I don't belong here." "You belong here more than you realize," Linda countered firmly. "Ethan doesn't offer trust easily, but he trusts you. That means something. And it's time you start trusting yourself." Her words sank deep, leaving Amara quiet, as she finished feeding Serenity, who gurgled happily in her arms. Linda squeezed her shoulder before heading out. "Start standing taller, Amara. You're not just surviving anymore. You're building something," involving her in the estate. A few days later, Ethan invited Amara to the main house for a meeting in his study. Nervous but curious, she knocked softly before stepping inside. The room was warm and elegant, lined with bookshelves and framed photographs of construction projects Sterling Enterprises had completed over the years. Ethan sat behind a large oak desk, reviewing documents, but he glanced up when she entered. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing toward a seat across from him. "I wanted your opinion on something." "My opinion?" Amara echoed, surprised. He nodded, sliding a sketch across the desk. "I'm considering adding a small playground behind the guest house, swing slides, maybe even a sandbox. I thought the girls would enjoy it as they get older. Amara blinked, stunned, into silence. You want my input? Ethan smiled faintly. It's for them, and you're their mother. Your voice matters. Something about the simplicity of his words left her throat tight. She nodded slowly, tracing her finger over the pencil marks on the sketch. I think they'd love it, she said softly. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her momentarily before speaking. Good. Then we'll make it happen. Marcus returns. That fragile sense of peace was shattered 2 evenings later. Amara was returning from a short walk through the gardens with the stroller when she spotted a familiar figure waiting near the estate's outer gate. Her breath caught as she slowed her steps. Marcus. He looked thinner than before, his hoodie pulled tight against the cold. But his stance was tense, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. What are you doing here? Amara asked sharply, stopping several feet away. I came to talk, Marcus said, his tone clipped. I want to see my kids. You lost that right the night you walked out, she replied firmly, glancing at the stroller protectively. They're my daughters, he shot back. I have a say. No, you don't, she said, her voice rising despite herself. Not after abandoning them. Not after abandoning me. Marcus's jaw tightened as his gaze drifted past her toward the sprawling estate behind the gates. So this is where you live now. Got yourself a rich man taking care of you. That's how you're keeping them fed. Her chest burned with anger. I'm working. I'm doing everything I can to give them a better life. You think he's going to keep you around forever? Marcus sneered, his voice low and cutting. Women like you don't belong in places like this. When he gets bored, where will you go then? Before Amara could reply, Ethan appeared behind her, his voice steady but cold. Is there a problem here? Marcus turned, his expression hardening as he sized him up. Who are you? Ethan replied evenly. I'm the man who cares for the people you abandoned. You should leave. Marcus bristled, his fists clenching at his sides. For a tense moment, Amara feared it would escalate. But finally, Marcus stepped back, his glare sharp and bitter. This isn't over, he muttered before walking away, disappearing into the shadows beyond the gate. Aftermath. Amara stood frozen, her hands gripping the stroller so tightly her knuckles ached. Ethan stepped closer, his voice softer now. Are you all right? She nodded shakily. I'm fine, just shaken. You won't have to deal with him here, Ethan said firmly. The estate has security. If he tries to come back uninvited, they'll handle it. Amara exhaled slowly, forcing herself to calm down. Thank you, she whispered, her voice unsteady. I didn't expect him to find me here. Ethan hesitated, his gaze steady on hers. You don't have to face this alone, Amara. Not anymore. Her breath caught at the quiet certainty in his tone. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that someone finally meant those words. Late-night reflection. That night, after putting the triplets to bed, Amara sat by the nursery window in the guest house, staring out at the gardens bathed in moonlight. Marcus's words echoed in her mind, sharp and poisonous. Women like you don't belong in places like this. But then she remembered Ethan's calm and unwavering voice. Your voice matters. Somewhere between those two truths lay the fragile ground she stood on now. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. She wanted to build a life here for serenity, faith, and grace, and maybe for herself. Closing scene. The next morning, Ethan stopped by with a folder of blueprints under his arm, his usual controlled expression, softer than normal. About the playground, he said, setting the plans on the table. I'd like you to help pick everything out. Amara looked up at him, surprised. Me? You? He confirmed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. This is their home, Amara. It should feel like yours too. For the first time in a very long time, she believed him. The morning began quietly, the peaceful silence that Amara was starting to treasure. Sunlight spilled through the nursery curtains, painting soft patterns across the hardwood floor as Serenity, Faith, and Grace babbled happily in their cribs. Amara poured herself a cup of coffee and settled at the kitchen table, relishing the rare calm. The knock at the door came sharply, shattering it. She opened it to find Linda holding a phone in one hand and looking grim. "You'd better sit down," Linda said quietly, stepping inside. Amara frowned. "What's wrong?" Linda handed her the phone. On the screen was a local news website. The headline made Amara's stomach drop. Billionaire Ethan Sterling's charity case. Single mother of triplets moves into estate. Beneath it was a photograph taken through the estate's gates. Amara pushing the stroller, the guest house faintly visible in the background. Another image showed Ethan standing beside her outside Sterling Tower, handing her a folder. The article was cruel, dissecting every aspect of her life, calling her a welfare-dependent single mother, accusing her of manipulating Ethan for money, and speculating about the nature of their relationship. Amara's hand trembled as she scrolled through the hateful comments flooding the page. Of course, another gold digger who got lucky. Triplets. Bet 3 different fathers are in the picture. Sterling's losing his mind. A woman like that doesn't belong in his world. Her breath came shallow and fast. Who would even... How did they... "Someone's been watching you," Linda said softly. These photos didn't take themselves. The call from Ethan. Ethan arrived at the guest house an hour later, his expression hard and controlled. "I saw it," he said, setting his phone on the table. Amara's throat felt tight. "They're saying awful things. About me. About the girls." "They're wrong," Ethan replied firmly. "None of it matters. It matters to everyone else." She shot back, her voice cracking despite her effort to stay composed. "People are already whispering, Ethan. The community thinks I trapped you, your company." "Stop," he interrupted, his tone steady but sharp enough to silence her. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." But she shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "This isn't just about me anymore. Your name's in the headlines. Your company's in the headlines. They're going to drag you down because of me." Ethan's jaw tightened, his gray eyes unyielding. Let them try. The backlash begins. By afternoon, the article had spread beyond local news to national business blogs. Ethan's phone buzzed constantly with calls from investors and board members. At Sterling Tower, tension mounted. Mr. Sterling, his assistant, said carefully during a conference call, "Several clients have expressed concerns. They're questioning your judgment." "Over my personal life?" Ethan asked, his voice icy. "Over the company's image," she clarified delicately. "Some contracts are at risk. The board is recommending a public statement to describe the nature of your relationship." Amara stood quietly in the office's corner, watching Ethan straighten his shoulders. "No statements," he said firmly. "Ethan." "No." He repeated, his voice rising slightly. "I won't let anyone dictate how I protect my family." The assistant hesitated. "Then the board wants a press conference. Today." Ethan glanced at Amara, his jaw set. "Good. Schedule it." Amara's eyes widened. "Ethan, no. You can't do this. It'll make things worse." "It'll make things clear," he corrected calmly. "They're going to hear the truth from me." Breaking point. Amara paced the kitchen back at the guest house, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Linda sat nearby, watching her anxiously. "I should leave," Amara said suddenly, her voice shaking. "Take the girls and go somewhere else. If I'm gone, the noise dies down." Linda frowned. "And go where?" "Back to that freezing apartment. Back to 3 jobs and no child care." Amara hesitated, pressing a hand to her forehead. I just... I don't want to ruin his life, Linda. He's done so much for us already. Linda's voice softened. Do you trust Ethan? Amara stopped pacing. Of course I do. Then let him stand by you, Linda said firmly. That man isn't protecting you out of pity, Amara. He's protecting you because he cares. You and those girls, you matter to him. The press conference. That afternoon, a sea of cameras and reporters gathered outside Sterling Enterprises headquarters. Flashing lights reflected off the sleek glass building as microphones stretched toward the small podium at the front. Ethan stepped forward, calm and composed, in a tailored navy suit. Behind him stood Amara, holding Serenity, while Faith and Grace rested in the stroller nearby, watched over by Linda. Thank you for coming. Ethan began, his voice steady, carrying effortlessly over the crowd's murmurs. I want to address recent headlines and speculation regarding my personal life. The reporters leaned in closer. He continued. 6 months ago, I met Amara Lewis, a woman working 3 jobs to provide for her 3 beautiful daughters. She was facing extraordinary challenges, yet her resilience, integrity, and love for her children were unlike anything I've ever seen. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. I offered her a job as a live-in caretaker because I trusted her. That professional relationship has grown into something deeper, something I'm proud of. I care deeply for Amara and her daughters. They are not charity cases. They are family. The murmurs in the crowd swelled into chaos as hands shot up, reporters shouting questions. Are you romantically involved? Will this affect company leadership? Is she moving into the main house? Ethan raised a hand, silencing them instantly. He said firmly that my personal life does not change the values of this company. But be clear, I will not apologize for helping the people I care about. If any client or partner has a problem with my priorities, they can take their business elsewhere. The statement landed like thunder, echoing across the plaza. Aftermath. That evening, they returned to the estate in silence. Amara sat on the couch in the guest house, holding Faith against her chest as Ethan stood near the window, hands in his pockets. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, he said, turning to face her. I did. Amara blinked back, tears struggling to find her voice. You just risked everything. Ethan shook his head slightly, his expression unwavering. I didn't risk anything that matters. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, neither moved, the weight of unspoken feelings filling the space between them. Then Serenity stirred in the crib, breaking the silence. Ethan exhaled slowly, nodding toward the nursery. Get some rest tonight. Let me deal with the noise. For the first time since the article dropped, Amara felt like she could breathe again. Closing scene. The backlash was far from over, but so was Ethan's quiet, relentless defense of her. And as she tucked the triplets into their cribs later that night, Amara finally allowed herself to believe something she'd been too afraid to name. Maybe she and her girls weren't just surviving anymore. Maybe for the first time, they were becoming part of something bigger, a home, a family, a future. Family. The week following the press conference passed in a blur. The media storm hadn't fully calmed, but Ethan's statement had silenced some speculation. Still, whispers followed Amara everywhere. At the grocery store, at the park. She caught the occasional sidelong glance, even among some of the estate staff. She told herself she didn't care, but the weight of judgment pressed heavily on her shoulders. That's when Ethan approached her one evening as she was folding baby clothes in the guest house. He stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. I have a conference in Chicago this weekend, he said, his voice even. 3 days. I want you and the girls to come with me. Amara looked up, startled. Us. Why, Ethan said, simply because I don't want to leave you here alone, not with the media still circling. And He hesitated, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'd like you there." The reluctance. Amara's first instinct was to refuse. "You'll be busy," she said, shaking her head. "We'd get in the way." "The girls," Ethan interrupted gently. "You won't be in the way. The hotel has plenty of space, and Elena's coming to help with the triplets. I've already arranged everything." Her brows furrowed. "You planned this before asking me," he admitted. "I hoped you'd say yes." A faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Amara hesitated, torn between fear and longing. The idea of leaving the estate felt terrifying, stepping into his world publicly, as though daring people to talk more. But something in Ethan's steady and sure expression made her want to trust him. Finally, she nodded. "All right. We'll come." Arrival in Chicago. 3 days later, Amara stood in awe outside the glass-paneled luxury hotel towering above the bustling streets of Chicago. Bellhops rushed to unload luggage while Ethan spoke briefly with the manager, his quiet authority commanding immediate attention. Within minutes, they were escorted to the top-floor suite. The rooms were breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, soft carpets beneath their feet, and a kitchen stocked with fresh fruit formula, and even favorite snacks Ethan remembered from conversations. Amara said softly that you didn't have to do all this, as she settled the triplets into their portable cribs. "I know," Ethan replied from across the room, loosening his jacket. "But I wanted to." She glanced at him, feeling the weight of gratitude pressing against her chest. It wasn't just the hotel or the comfort, it was how he thought of every detail, as though their needs were always on his mind. A day in the city. While Ethan attended meetings, Amara spent the days exploring Chicago with Elena's help. They visited Millennium Park, where Serenity giggled as she reached for the fountain, spraying mist into the air. Faith clapped her tiny hands, delighted by the pigeons darting across the plaza, while Grace napped peacefully in her stroller, oblivious to the excitement around her. Amara watched at the Children's Museum as Ethan joined them during his lunch break, sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Serenity stack colorful blocks into uneven towers. He laughed softly when Faith tried to knock them down, and for a fleeting moment, he looked nothing like a billionaire CEO. He looked like a father. That thought lodged in Amara's chest, unexpected and warm, leaving her breathless. The balcony conversation. That evening, after Elena retired to the adjoining room with the girls asleep, Amara stepped onto the suite's balcony, drawn by the quiet hum of the city below. The lights glittered like distant stars, and the cool night air brushed against her skin. Ethan joined her moments later, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one without a word, leaning against the railing beside her. "It's beautiful," she murmured, gazing at the skyline. "It is," he agreed, though his eyes were on her instead of the view. For a while, neither spoke, content with the silence between them. Finally, Ethan broke it. He said quietly that the last few weeks haven't been easy for you. People talk. They always will. But I want you to remember something. Amara glanced at him, waiting. He said you belong exactly where you are, his voice steady and deliberate. Not because I say so. Not because of this estate or this hotel or any of it. You belong because you've fought harder than anyone I know to be here. Her throat tightened, the tea warming her hands as his words sank in. You really believe that? She asked softly. I do, he said without hesitation. And I need you to start believing it too. Amara stared at him, searching his face for any trace of pity, but found none. There was only sincerity, quiet and unyielding, breaking the walls. She hesitated before speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever wonder, why me? Out of everyone you could have helped, why choose us? Ethan turned fully toward her, leaning his arms on the railing. "Because when I first met you, I saw someone standing on the edge of everything, exhausted, overwhelmed, but refusing to quit. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, what it means to fight for the people you love." Her chest ached at his words, tears threatening to sting her eyes. "I was terrified," she admitted quietly. "When I moved into the estate, I thought it would all disappear one day, like a dream I couldn't keep." Ethan shook his head. "It's not a dream, Amara. This is real. You and the girls are safe, and I'm not going anywhere." Something inside her shifted. Then a fragile wall she'd been carrying for years began to crack. An unspoken understanding. They stood silently, the city lights reflecting softly in the glass doors behind them. Ethan didn't reach for her hand, didn't move closer, didn't break the boundary. Neither of them had dared cross, and yet somehow the space between them felt charged with something unspoken. Amara took a slow breath, steadying herself as her thoughts tangled in emotions she wasn't ready to name. For months, she had carried fear like a shadow, fear of failure, judgment, and never being enough. But standing there beside Ethan, listening to the calm certainty in his voice, she felt something different. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in possibility. Closing scene. Later that night, as she lay in bed listening to the soft breathing of her daughters in their cribs, Amara replayed the balcony conversation in her mind. The words he'd spoken lingered like a promise. She didn't know what would come next, not with the media, Marcus, or the scrutiny surrounding them. But for the first time since the triplets were born, the future didn't feel impossible. It felt open, and that terrified her just as much as it set her free. The estate felt quieter when they returned from Chicago, but the tension hadn't disappeared. The media storm had softened, yet whispers still lingered in the city. Speculative headlines, opinion pieces, and social gossip threads dissecting Ethan's life and Amara's place. Amara did her best to ignore it, focusing on the girls and her new responsibilities. Still, some nights she lay awake wondering when the fragile peace would shatter again. She didn't have to wait long. Marcus escalates. One chilly afternoon, Amara was walking the triplets around the gardens when she spotted Marcus leaning against the outer gates again, his posture rigid and defensive. Her stomach twisted instantly. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" she called, keeping her voice low but firm. He stepped closer, his eyes hard. "I want to see my kids. I have rights, Amara." She replied that you lost those rights the day you abandoned them, her tone sharp. "You don't get to come and go as you please." His gaze shifted toward the sprawling estate behind her. "Can you replace me? Let him raise my daughters while you play house with a billionaire." Her grip on the stroller tightened, her jaw set. "I'm giving them the life they deserve. Something you walked away from." Marcus scoffed, his voice dripping with resentment. "This isn't over. I'll fight you if I have to." Before Amara could respond, Ethan appeared, his steps steady and deliberate as he approached. "That's enough," Ethan said calmly, though his voice carried a quiet authority that left no room for argument. "Leave now, Marcus. This isn't the place." Marcus's fists clenched at his sides, but after a tense moment, he stepped back and turned away, muttering under his breath. Amara exhaled shakily, grateful for Ethan's presence, though unease lingered. She knew Marcus wasn't finished, and the scrutiny surrounding her family was not. Planning the party. Amid all the turmoil, Ethan insisted on planning something special, the girls' first birthday. "They've had a challenging first year," he said one evening as they sat in the guesthouse living room. "You have too. They deserve to be celebrated." Amara hesitated, worrying it would be too much, but Linda quickly joined Ethan's side. "Let him do this," she urged. "It's not just a party, it's a fresh start." Over the following weeks, the estate transformed. Colorful tents were set up on the lawn, strings of fairy lights hung from the trees, and 3 matching high chairs were placed beneath a pastel archway decorated with roses and tiny gold stars. A photographer arrived to capture every moment, and Elena carefully planned a menu that balanced baby-friendly treats with elegant dishes for the adults. Despite her doubts, Amara couldn't ignore the excitement bubbling inside her as the day approached. The celebration. On the morning of the party, Amara dressed the girls in soft white dresses with handmade flower crowns Elena had crafted herself. Serenity clapped happily as Amara tied the ribbons under her chin. Faith babbled non-stop, and Grace tried to chew on hers. "You look like little angels," Amara whispered, kissing each tiny forehead. When they arrived at the decorated lawn, Amara froze at the sight of dozens of guests gathered under the golden spring sunlight. Ethan had invited neighbors, close colleagues, and even a few community members Amara hadn't seen since before the birth. To her surprise, Mrs. Rodriguez, her old neighbor from the apartment complex, hurried up with tears in her eyes. "Mija," she exclaimed, embracing Amara tightly. "Look at you, and look at these beautiful babies." Amara laughed through the sudden emotion. "I didn't see you here." "Ethan called me," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, glancing toward him. "He wanted to ensure the people who cared about you before were here to celebrate with you." Amara turned to find Ethan across the lawn, helping set up a sprinkler for the older children. He winked playfully when he caught her gaze before returning to his task. Her heart swelled with gratitude she couldn't put into words. Community redemption. Amara noticed something remarkable as the party continued. The whispers had changed. People who had once judged her gathered around, cooing over the girls, complimenting their names, and laughing at their tiny cake-covered faces. Even Mrs. Patterson, the same woman who had shunned her at church months ago, approached hesitantly. "You have beautiful daughters," she said awkwardly, adjusting her shawl. "I was wrong before?" Amara blinked, caught off guard, but nodded graciously. "Thank you." In that moment, she felt something she hadn't dared to hope for: acceptance. The proposal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan guided Amara toward a small gazebo, draped with white flowers and glowing fairy lights. The crowd quieted as Elena gathered the girls nearby, holding Serenity, while Faith and Grace clapped at the glittering lights above them. Ethan, Amara said softly, glancing around. "What's going on?" He turned to face her, his expression serious yet warm. A year ago, he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I was living in the shadow of grief, convinced that life had nothing left to offer me. And then you walked into my world with 3 little girls and more courage than I've ever seen." Amara's breath caught as her heart pounded in her chest. "You've given me back something I thought I lost forever: purpose, laughter, family." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a delicate ring shimmered in the soft light. "Amara." Ethan said, his voice low but clear. "Will you marry me? Will you let me love you and raise Serenity, Faith, and Grace as my daughters? Our daughters." Tears blurred her vision as she covered her mouth with her hand. For a long moment she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "Yes." The crowd cheered as Ethan slipped the ring onto her trembling hand. Elena cried openly. Mrs. Rodriguez clapped joyfully, and even the triplets squealed in confusion at the sudden applause. Closing scene. Later that night, after the guests left and the girls were finally asleep, Amara stood with Ethan on the gazebo steps beneath the twinkling lights. "I still don't understand why you chose us," she admitted softly. Ethan slipped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I didn't choose you," Amara, he murmured, we found each other. And as she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, Amara realized this wasn't just a promise for her, it was a promise for serenity, faith, and grace. For the first time, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt like home. Spring came early to the Sterling estate, draping the gardens in soft pastels and sunlight. Rows of white chairs lined the freshly cut grass, forming a perfect aisle that led to an archway covered in cascading roses and twinkling fairy lights. Amara stood inside the guest house, heart pounding, as she gazed at her reflection in the full-length mirror. Her wedding dress was simple, but elegant flowing silk that moved like water with every step. Elena stood behind her, gently adjusting the delicate veil, while Linda pinned a final curl into place. Elena whispered that you look like an angel, dabbing at the corners of her eyes. Amara laughed softly, nerves and excitement tangled together. I feel like one too, but mostly because I can't believe this is real. It's real, Linda said firmly, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You deserve every bit of it. Walking toward forever. Outside, soft music played as the ceremony began. Ethan stood beneath the arch, waiting his usual composure, replaced by a quiet intensity. The crowd hushed as Amara appeared at the top of the aisle, holding a bouquet of white lilies in trembling hands. For a moment she froze, overwhelmed by the sight of familiar faces. Elena, Linda, Mrs. Rodriguez, colleagues, neighbors, all gathered to witness this new chapter of her life. Even Mrs. Patterson, once one of her harshest critics, smiled warmly from the second row. Then Amara saw Ethan's expression steady and unwavering, and her fear melted away. Each step down the aisle felt like closing the distance between who she had been and who she had become. Vows and promises. When she reached him, Ethan took her hands, grounding her instantly. The officiant spoke of love, commitment, and second chances, but Amara barely heard the words. Her world had narrowed to Ethan, to the soft strength in his voice as he repeated his vows. I promise to love you without condition, he said, his voice steady, but thick with emotion. To stand beside you when life is easy and when it's hard. To cherish you, and serenity, faith, and grace our daughters for as long as I breathe. Tears filled Amara's eyes as she replied, her voice trembling. I promise to trust you, to laugh with you, to dream with you, and to walk through every storm with you. I promise to protect the family we've built together, and to love you for all of my days. Ethan slipped a delicate ring onto her finger, and she placed one on his in return. You may kiss the bride, the officiant said warmly. As their lips met, the crowd erupted in cheers. The triplets seated in the front row clapped their tiny hands and squealed in delight, unaware of how completely their world had just changed, becoming a family. After the ceremony, Ethan knelt before the 3 matching high chairs where serenity, faith, and grace babbled happily. He held out 3 small framed documents, his voice catching slightly as he spoke. These, he said softly, make it official. Amara leaned closer, tears slipping down her cheeks as she read the adoption decree. With a simple signature, Ethan had legally adopted the girls. From today, he whispered, brushing a hand gently over Grace's curls, you are mine, ours. Serenity gurgled in response. Faith clapped, and Grace stuffed part of her dress into her mouth, earning laughter from everyone nearby. For Amara, it was the moment she hadn't realized. She'd been holding her breath for the moment. Her daughters finally had a father who had chosen them wholly and without hesitation. The celebration. The reception unfolded beneath strings of golden lights and the soft scent of spring blossoms. Tables were set with ivory linens and crystal glasses, while a small corner of the lawn became a play area for the children. complete with tiny swings and a sandbox. Ethan's gift to the girls came to life. Laughter drifted across the evening air as friends and family embraced new beginnings. Elena raised her glass first. She said warmly to the man who rebuilt this house with love and the woman who filled it with life. Linda followed, her voice steady but emotional. Amara, you taught us what resilience looks like. Ethan, you reminded us what generosity means. Together, you've shown us all what it means to choose family. Ethan squeezed Amara's hand beneath the table, his gaze never leaving hers. Quiet moments. Later that night, after the music faded and the last guests departed, Amara and Ethan walked hand in hand through the quiet gardens. Fireflies glimmered near the rose bushes, and the soft murmur of the fountains filled the silence. Amara whispered, "You did all this for us," her voice thick with gratitude. "For me, for them." Ethan stopped, turning to face her beneath the starlight. "Not for you," he said gently, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "With you. Always with you." She smiled, leaning into his touch, her chest swelling with a joy so complete it almost hurt. For the first time in her life, she felt complete, not because of the house wealth or even the wedding, but because she and her daughters finally had a place where they were safe, wanted, and loved. The new chapter. That night, after tucking Serenity, Faith, and Grace into their cribs in the nursery, Ethan had decorated himself. Amara stood at the doorway, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. "Sleep well, my loves," she whispered. "Tomorrow, we begin the rest of our lives." Behind her, Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Welcome home," he murmured. Amara smiled, leaning back into him. "We've been home since the day you found us." Outside, the stars scattered across the velvet sky, and the Sterling estate glowed softly beneath their light. For the first time, Amara didn't wonder if happiness would last. She knew it would, because they would face everything together. Final reflection. Amara's journey had begun in fear, loss, and judgment. She'd been abandoned, shamed, and pushed to the brink of hopelessness. But through courage, kindness, and the power of chosen family, she had built something unshakable. A life rooted in love, strength, and belonging. And as she stood hand in hand with Ethan, watching their daughters dream beneath the starlight, she understood one thing clearly. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Epilogue and gentle call to action. Thank you for being part of their story. If you followed Amara and Ethan's journey from the beginning, from heartbreak to hope, from survival to love, what was your favorite moment in their journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, consider helping others discover it. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, heartwarming tales like this one, because sometimes the happiest endings are only the start of another beautiful chapter.